Hello, friend, welcome back. With one final document, Caryn Chandler thought she had won it all. The farm, the money, the legacy. What she didn't know is that Amy Roloff had already written the last page of the story a decade ago. The scene was set for the ultimate coronation, the final act in a long and bitter war for the soul of the Roloff family. Caryn, the ever-present partner, the loyal confidant, was about to be crowned the undisputed queen of the empire. Matt Roloff's final will and testament was her victory decree, the legal instrument that would finally erase Amy's influence and dispossess the very children who were born on that land. But in the cold, quiet room where legacies are read, a ghost from the past was about to speak, and it held a contract that would turn a coronation into a catastrophe. The final chapter wasn't about a will. It was about a promise, a secret pact made in the fires of divorce. A masterstroke of foresight that would prove Amy Roloff was always playing chess, while everyone else was just playing checkers. This was the story you have all been waiting for. The definitive conclusion to the saga of Little People Big World. The information we are about to share is based on insider reports and exclusive theories pieced together from sources close to the family. If you want to be the first to hear every shocking detail of this final showdown, make sure you press that like button, subscribe to USA Drama Queen, and ring that notification bell. You are not going to want to miss a single word of this. The day of the will reading dawned gray and somber, a fitting backdrop for the end of an era. The air inside the prestigious Portland law firm's conference room was thick with a toxic cocktail of grief, resentment, and barely concealed anticipation. Seated around the polished mahogany table were the fractured remnants of the Roloff family. Zach and Tori, their faces etched with a weary resignation, had prepared for this blow for years. Jeremy and Audrey, ever the optimist, still clung to a sliver of hope that their father wouldn't deal them the ultimate betrayal. Molly and Jacob were there, too. Silent sentinels to their family's implosion. Their expressions unreadable, but their presence a heavy weight in the room. Across from them sat Caryn Chandler. She was the picture of dignified sorrow, dressed in tasteful black, a single tear dabbed delicately from her eye with a pristine handkerchief. But her grief was a performance, a meticulously crafted facade. Behind the veil of mourning, her mind was buzzing with the triumphant hum of victory. Today, she would be validated. Today, all her years of service, of managing Matt, of sidelining his ex-wife and children would pay off. The farm, the sprawling, iconic, multi-million-dollar Roloff farms would be hers. The legacy, the brand, the fortune, all of it. She had played the long game, and she had won. And then there was Amy Roloff. She sat slightly apart from her children, a silent, composed figure. She wasn't weeping. She wasn't wringing her hands. There was a stillness about her, a calm that was deeply unsettling to anyone who noticed. Caryn, in a fleeting glance, dismissed it as shock, the final acceptance of her utter and complete defeat. It was a fatal miscalculation. Amy wasn't in shock. She was waiting. She was the grand strategist, patiently waiting for the enemy to walk into a trap she had set a decade prior. The estate lawyer, a man named Mr. Albright, cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense silence. He adjusted his glasses and unfolded the document that held the power to rewrite their lives. "We are gathered here today," he began, his voice a monotonous drone, "to read the final will and testament of Matthew James Roloff." He spoke of Matt's final wishes, his love for his family, the standard legal preamble that felt like a cruel joke in a room so devoid of love. The children braced themselves. Then came the hammer blow. Mr. Albright's voice was clear and emotionless as he read the dispositive provisions. "To my children, Zachary, Jeremy, Molly, and Jacob, I leave my love and my hope that they find their own way in the world. I have provided for them throughout their lives, and I am confident in their ability to succeed independently." It was a cold, clinical dismissal. A verbal pat on the head while the knife was being slid between their ribs. The children flinched as if physically struck. Zach's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing in his cheek. Tori reached for his hand under the table. And then the coronation. "As for the entirety of my remaining estate," the lawyer read on, "including all real and personal property, all shares and interests in Roloff Farms LLC, the Roloff Company, and all associated business entities, and the entirety of my financial accounts, investments, and personal fortune. I bequeath without reservation or condition to my devoted partner and companion Caryn Chandler." The words hung in the air, sucking the oxygen from the room. It was done. He had actually done it. He had disinherited them all completely, utterly. The farm, their home, their birthright, the land their hands had helped build was now the sole property of the woman they all blamed for tearing their family apart. Caryn's performance was masterful. A gasp, a hand flying to her chest in feigned shock. "Oh, Matt," she whispered, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. I had no idea, but her eyes for a split second betrayed her. They glittered with a cold, hard triumph. She looked across the table at Amy and the children, and in that fleeting glance was a message of absolute dominance. "Checkmate, I win." The foundational lie that had brought them to this moment was one Matt had repeated like a mantra for years, a narrative that Caryn had nurtured and weaponized, that Matt had the unilateral right to give the farm to whomever he wanted. "I bought Amy out," he would thunder in interviews and on the show. "It's my farm now. My name is on the deed." This declaration became his justification, his shield against the accusations that he was robbing his children of their legacy. Our insider report suggests this was more than just a belief of Matt's. It was a carefully cultivated strategy orchestrated by Caryn. For years, she allegedly worked to isolate Matt from his children, framing their desires to be part of the farm's future not as a continuation of a legacy, but as a greedy cash grab. "They're entitled," sources claimed she would tell him. "They don't appreciate what you've built. They just want a handout." This narrative reached its zenith during the failed negotiations with Zach and Jeremy. She positioned herself as the protector of Matt's legacy, the only one who truly understood his vision. She convinced him that his sons weren't worthy, that their offers were insulting, that they didn't have the grit to run the farm as he had. The lie was insidious, because it was wrapped in the language of paternal disappointment. It allowed Matt to reframe his own selfishness as a difficult but necessary business decision. A father teaching his sons a hard lesson about the real world. But it was always a lie. A foundational rotten lie that ignored a truth so profound, so legally binding that it had been waiting dormant for a decade. The truth was that the farm wasn't just Matt's to give. It was a marital asset forged over 30 years of shared struggle, sacrifice, and partnership with Amy. And Amy, in her quiet, often underestimated way, had never forgotten that. She had foreseen a day just like this one. A day when Matt's judgment, clouded by illness and influenced by another, might lead him to make the ultimate irreversible mistake. Back in the lawyer's office, the air was thick with the fallout of the will's reading. Zach was on his feet, his face a mask of fury. "This is a joke," he seethed, his voice trembling with rage. "After everything, after all the promises, he gives it all to her." Jeremy simply shook his head, a look of profound, so deep disappointment on his face. Audrey was trying to comfort him, but her own eyes were filled with tears of disbelief. Caryn, meanwhile, was accepting condolences from Mr. Albright, playing the part of the surprised but gracious inheritor. "I'll do my best to honor his memory," she said, her voice dripping with false humility. "I'll take care of the farm. It's what he would have wanted." She was already envisioning her future. The new sign at the entrance, Roloff Farms, Caryn Chandler, proprietor. The family photos in the big house replaced with her own. The final complete eraser of Amy Roloff. All eyes eventually turned to Amy. Her children looked at her, their expressions a mixture of confusion and a sliver of desperate hope. Surely she wouldn't take this lying down. Surely she had something to say. Caryn watched her, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips, daring her to make a scene, to rage, to cry. It would only make her victory sweeter. But Amy did none of those things. She met the gaze of her children, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod of reassurance. Then she turned her attention not to Caryn, not to the fuming Zach, but to her own lawyer, a quiet, unassuming woman named Miss Davis, who had been sitting silently beside her throughout the entire proceeding. Amy looked at Miss Davis and gave a single, deliberate nod. It was a signal the game was not over. The Queen was about to make her move. This moment of quiet composure was the culmination of a decade of strategic patience. To understand its power, we have to go back to the darkest days of the Roloff divorce. Exclusive theories based on a deep dive into the family's history suggest that the final negotiations were brutal. Matt, eager to start his new life with Caryn, wanted a quick and clean break. He offered a buyout for Amy's half of the farm, a deal that was publicly framed as generous. He just wanted it over with. But Amy held firm on one particular point. It wasn't about more money or different assets. It was about the future. It was about legacy. Sources close to the negotiations at the time whispered that Amy had a profound and specific fear. She had watched Caryn's influence over Matt grow from that of an employee to that of a partner. She saw how easily Matt could be swayed, how his perception of his own children could be colored by an outside voice. She had a chilling premonition of a future where Matt, perhaps in his later years, could be convinced to cut the children out entirely. She insisted on a private addendum to the divorce. The air in the conference room, already thick with tension, now crackled with a new, unknown energy. All attention had shifted from Caryn's performance of gracious victory to Amy's quiet, deliberate nod to her lawyer, Miss Davis. The smirk on Caryn's face faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of uncertainty in her triumphant eyes. This was not part of the script. Miss Davis, a woman who had until now been as still and unobtrusive as a piece of the furniture, opened a slim, elegant leather portfolio that lay on the table before her. She did not stand or raise her voice. Instead, she spoke with a calm, crystalline clarity that cut through the emotional chaos. "Mr. Albright," she began, addressing the estate lawyer who was still holding Matt's will. "As you have just executed your duty in reading the last will and testament of Matthew James Roloff, dated June 14th of last year, it is now pertinent to enter into the record a prior and legally binding contractual agreement that directly impacts the disposition of the estate's primary asset, Roloff Farms." Caryn's composure broke. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice losing its practiced, mournful tone and sharpening into something hard and brittle. "What nonsense is this? The will is clear. Matt's wishes